All right, let's start Mongo, the client, and this will connect to the server, the MongoDB database server, and then we can ask to change to the database that we want, the schema. I will say that we want CS5200. Okay, and from here we can ask if there are any collections. In this case, there are no collections yet. And we can start sending commands to the database to insert data, to retrieve data, very much like we would in a SQL server, right? So let's create something. All commands start with db dot, and then followed by the collection, right? The collection of objects that we want to insert into, right? So let's start maybe. Let's create an employee management application, right? So let's create it. We'll select the name of the collection, the equivalent of tables, as employee, right? Dot, and then what do you want to do? Do you want to retrieve data? Do you want to insert data? Do you want to update data? Do you want to remove data? So in this case, we're going to insert data into the collection. And so it's somewhat object-oriented notation here, where you have all these dot and these functions, and then you can provide as argument JSON objects, right? And in particular, this JSON object that we're going to provide as argument is the data that's going to be used to insert into a database. So for instance, we might put here maybe a username, and then maybe a password. Password. Then maybe a first name. Ooh. What? Okay, all right. Alice. Last name. Bless you. And this may be Wonderland. Okay, let's do that. It comes back saying that, yep, one object was inserted, right? We don't call these records as we would in a SQL database. We call them documents, right? This is a document-oriented database. Right now, there's only one document in there, and we can just like we can insert, we can also retrieve. We can read from the database. We can say employee, right, and then find. Find is the equivalent of selecting data, right? If you just call find with no arguments, that's the equivalent of doing a select star, right, with no where clause. There's no predicate. In this case, it returns all the documents, which is just one document right now, and it includes the object we just inserted, Alice Wonderland. And notice that the database automatically added a new field here, _ID, which uses a unique identifier to make sure that the record is indeed unique. Let's insert yet another one. Maybe Bob with maybe the same password. And this is Bob Marley. And let's create yet another one. Let's create Charlie. Charlie Garcia. Right, and then we can retrieve them all by doing a find. It retrieves all of them. Like this is a little bit hard to read. You can at the end of each one of these functions, you can tag along several pipes or functions that can take the output of the previous one and then massage it, maybe sort it or find something else or filter it or aggregate it, right, or group it, or just plain displaying it a little bit more easier to read, right, where now it's displayed as separate JSON objects with one field per line. Make sense? All right. Notice that if I insert, let's do an insert one more. Let's insert another one. And notice that let's see if we have here username and this let's say let's add another one. And we'll use the field first with Dan, or Daniel. We'll leave it Dan. And we'll do the last name. We'll say Craig. Okay. Notice that this document here is not the same. Doesn't have the same exact schema as the previous documents, right? Nevertheless, it allows me to insert it. Notice that we're using for first name, we're just using first instead of first name, last instead of last name. Okay. We skipped over the username, you skipped over the password, and the database didn't balk, right? Did not validate, right? Normally a relational database would say, no, this doesn't match the schema. I'm not going to accept this document, right? It doesn't match. But here we don't have those kinds. It's not something that you would actually do, right? But nevertheless, the schema, the database is no longer has the responsibility of validating these things, right? Instead, a lot of that responsibility is going to go towards the application. It'll be the application's responsibility, right, to validate this before sending it over to the database for storage. Okay, and that's fine because we normally would do this anyway, right? We wouldn't use a database all by itself. Typically, there would be an application layer on top of it, right? Typically, there will be some data layer that would have a data model. Right, maybe a Java data model or JavaScript data model or Python or PHP or whatever, right? Some object-oriented data layer, right? That would have this in memory anyway, right? So if you have if you have a schema that you're enforcing already at the application layer, it would be somewhat redundant to do it again or validate it here at the database, right? So instead, we're going to let the database do what it's good at. Storage, retrieval, indexing, finding things, right? Instead, let's take some of the burden out of the database and let's move it over to the application layer. All right, so we can definitely mix and match schemas. It doesn't do any validation. We can also modify things, right? We can say update. That allows us to update data that is already there. Update takes two arguments. The first argument is the equivalent of the where clause. Okay, that where you can filter and say I don't want to update all the documents. Instead, I just want to update just a few of the documents. Right. Similarly, in the find method, you can also do the same thing. The find method also can take an argument. Normally, if you don't give it any argument, it just returns all the records, right? Not records, documents. If you provide a filter, you can say, well, I don't want all of them. I only want the ones who has perhaps the username equal to Alice, right? So that filters, and only the ones that match that criteria are returned, right? In this case, the one that matches Alice. So you can use these JSON objects can be treated not only just as the data that is provided from the application, it can also be used for filtering or doing some other transformations. So in an update, the first JSON object is treated as the filter, right? Or which record do we want to manipulate, and then the second one is used as the actual update, right? The actual data that you want to change, and here you can say that I want to change the username, or I want to change it maybe to Daniel instead of Dan. Okay. Now, if I do it like that, this is going to replace the entire object. Here we're saying that the whole object is going to be replaced by this one object. Okay. If I do that and we do a find. It didn't update it. Okay, so mongoose. Right? When you do it from mongoose from the application, it actually replaces the entire object. Here, it just replaced. Actually, no, it didn't replace anything. Alice. Oh, Alice. Thank you. Yes, it replaced Alice. Alice's username is now Daniel. My intention was to replace Dan.
But it didn't replace the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it replaced Alice. The whole thing was replaced. Yeah. I meant to change the one that is first Dan and change it to Daniel. Okay. Anyway, so let's now do it for real. let's now do let's change the one whose first name is Dan. I'll change it to first name Daniel. But I don't want to replace the entire document, right? Like we just did for poor Alice, right? Instead, you can do it by field by field, right? So to do that, there are certain operators that you can add to these, right? Where, for instance, you can say a set. Notice that it starts with a $sign. This means that this is not a field, right? It should not be interpreted as a field. Instead, it is interpreted as a command, right? It's an application command. There's a whole bunch of commands. There's tons of them that, where you can create Boolean operators like or, and, not, and things like that, right? They're all in there. That allow you to also to edit, insert things into arrays, remove things from array like push, pull, and things like that. There's just tons and tons of operators. This is one of the more common ones that I want to set the following field or fields. Okay, here I'm changing just that one field first, and I'm sending it to Daniel, and to leave alone all the other fields, right? Only that one field. And then we close it here, right? This is the closure of the set command, right? And this is the data that we're changing. We're going to say OK. And indeed, notice that it comes back with a status saying that there was one document that matched and there was one document that was modified. We can do a query again, and we'll verify that indeed Dan was modified to Daniel. Okay, everybody good? All right. All right. So let me change Alice back. We'll change it. Let's see. Username Daniel. And I would like to set the username. I like to set it back to Alice. I like to set the password set back to what it used to be. I like to set the first name back to Alice and the last name back to Wonderland. Okay, we modify and we can do a find, and we're back. We rescued Alice. Right, so we can certainly do an insert. We can do a find, right, with the criteria. We can do an update. We can also do a remove. We can do a db dot employee and do a remove. And then again, we can do if you do a remove just like this, if you do an insert, it's not like SQL when you do a delete star, right, and you don't give any where clause. It just removes all the records. Unlike MySQL, this will not remove all the records, right? It won't remove all the documents. It just doesn't. If you don't provide any criteria, right, it won't remove anything. This will remove all the documents, right? I'm giving you an empty criteria, right? Meaning all the documents will match, right? It will remove all the documents. So let's not do that. Instead, I like to remove the record whose first name is Daniel, because the schema doesn't match with everybody else, right? I must have done a mistake, and so we'll remove it, and it'll remove just that one document. Make sense? Right? And I can then find all the ones that are still there. Alice, Bob, and Charlie are still there with my schema. Everybody good? All right. So this is exciting. We can manipulate and do this manually. Where it gets interesting is when we start working with from within code, right? And being able to programmatically interact with the database. All right. So let's do that next.